So we've established intercity, we've established regional, and in both cases as more than just a rebrand of an existing train operator. These autonomous organisations would fight to increase rail mode share according with the targets set by DfT, working together to segregate their services and maximise capacity and journey times with new tracks and trains. We've also determined that in some cases there would be a transfer wholesale of operations to the cities and their strategic authorities to align them much more closely to TfL, and TfL itself would take over more services. This should be more than just stickers on trains though. Ideally this would look to be a transfer wholesale of infrastructure and trains, or at least the leasing of them from GBR Regional. Across the board too, we will need to see trains being procured directly by Intercity and Regional, or on behalf of the strategic authorities where they are not sufficiently capable of achieving this themselves. All of these services would be operated underneath a new authority, Transport for England, integrating all modes outside of the cities for better rural and peri-urban travel. It would achieve this alongside Transport Scotland and Trafnidiaeth Cymru. But where does that leave the rest of the railway industry? Are we finished? There's a lot still on screen right now. So, we've done the operators, the passenger operators, we've done High Speed 2. I would argue that East West Rail would need to see the same level of integration into GBR Regional. We have looked to integrate functions of the DfT into TfE, likewise RDG, and some of the stuff within the kind of the shadow or transition GBR organisation would actually be transferred into Transport for England. Network Rail, I think we've almost entirely dissolved, but not quite. There's a couple of things outstanding. The rail regulator, what is its role in this new shape? I would say decidedly scant, frankly. EDF, you might be going, wait, what? EDF? The new railway organisation should be empowered to generate its own electricity. However it takes that process, whether it buys land and buys solar panels or whatever it happens to do, but it should be empowered to do that. The trade bodies stay as they are, local authorities, unions stay as they are, the universities, colleges, RAIB absolutely stays where it is. YRP, NSAR, the other bodies. I would argue perhaps that RSSB maybe would benefit from being going somewhere else. But anyway, even if we left those as they are, there's still quite a lot that we have not resolved, not least freight. Look, as I see it, there are two remaining major elements of the railway organisation that we need to round out: GBR Freight and GBR Engineering. GBR Freight would largely be what is currently Direct Rail Services. DRS, it's state-owned, but by DESNES, not DfT, weirdly. But with it would intentionally expand its remit to support itself and the other freight operators to widen rail's modal share for goods movement. So, GBR Freight wouldn't just be DRS, it would also be the freight functions of Network Rail to ensure that we're maximising deployment of freight, rail freight across the board, supporting the open access freight operators essentially, but achieving those targets set by DfT and the Railways Bill. It would also take over ownership of freight infrastructure assets such as sidings, rail freight interchanges, those freight only lines potentially. It would take ownership of that infrastructure. GBR Engineering, however, would be the body that sweeps up everything left on the table from Network Rail Route Services, Network Rail Engineering Services, IT, National Signalling Functions, the Technical Authority, all into a single, unified lead organisation. It would also unify engineering functions that were damagingly split by region, such as high output renewals and other pan-national functions, while the former routes would have been grouped under GBR Regional, potentially retaining that kind of regional structure, but that's kind of by the by, essentially. This is where the rolling programs come in, because as we went through in episode 305, the lion's share of GBR Engineering's work would be instigating programs of electrification, resignaling, training, and so much more, a pace and efficiency simply not achievable at a project or route scale. It's not all about trains either. Eventually the functions of the Roscos, such as fleet engineering, would go into GBR Engineering, as well as a range of train and technology related functions. Much more design would be centralised into GBR Engineering as well, avoiding the daft dance of the consultancies around work that has no benefit of being delivered externally. GBRX, no matter where it ends up, into GBR Engineering it goes. Both the freight and engineering bits of GBR would have a remit across Scotland, England and Wales as required by the devolved authorities. Given the benefits of scale, both Scotland and Wales would be able to reap from tapping into a GB-wide body. GBR Engineering would also carry out work on behalf of GBR Intercity and GBR Regional and GBR Freight as instructed. So this gives us GBR. This gives us the subsidiary organisations underneath the holding group. We've essentially created our own series of sectors that would sit under the umbrella GBR body. HR and finance functions should be set at the sector levels, not at the holding body level. All of this would be in aid of maximising what public transport can deliver with rail right at its heart. But what can an integrated railway achieve? What does it look like? This is where our chat with Joe Grew comes in.